caffeine it's a stimulant. It's stimulating the body and it's stimulating your adrenals. It does cause a cortisol reaction in the body. And so, my gosh, yes, our like over caffeinated society, we're just wearing down our adrenals left and right with things like caffeine.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited. We are going to discuss some things that we haven't really discussed much on this episode. We have Hope Pedraza available here to share her wisdom with us. She's a certified holistic nutritionist, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, board certified holistic health practitioner, Reiki practitioner, certified hair tissue and mineral analysis expert, founder of InBalance, a Pilates-based fitness franchise, and the host of the Hopeful and Wholesome podcast. And her mission is to help women improve their gut, hormone, thyroid, and autoimmune health and reconnect with themselves using functional nutrition and labs, nervous system support, energetic healing, which I really am excited to discuss here today, chakra balancing, and the framework of human design. Hope, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, great. There's so much that I want to touch on because your website is so great and you touch on so many different things. But let's kind of just start with a quick background of kind of how your health journey, kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of avenues that kind of put me on the path that I'm on now. My background is in dance. So I started dancing when I was 2-3 years old, and that kind of led me into this love of movement. And I danced my entire life up into my mid-20s. And I started Pilates sometime in college because it lit well to kind of my dance background. And so I started teaching Pilates, and that's what got me into my studio now that you mentioned. So I eventually opened up my own studio. And so throughout my kind of movement journey and my love of movement, I love the human body. Like I love learning about the human body. I love nutrition. There was kind of a dark side of that because I did have some disordered eating behavior for a while that I kind of had to work myself through. But I think all of that kind of led me on the path where I am now. And when I opened my studio, I wanted to create this space some men come into our studio, but it's predominantly women, but it's not a women's only, but the people who came into my studio could get like this comprehensive experience. And so I wanted to provide we have all different modalities at my studio. So anything you want in one spot, but then also this comprehensive wellness experience. You could get movement and nutrition and all these wellness pieces in one spot. And so initially I was just doing kind of like, basic nutrition coaching, and I'd help women they came to me, I'm using air quotes here, like they wanted to lose weight or they wanted to tone up, whatever. And I'm working with these women, and I'm realizing like, they're coming to me to lose weight or drop the pounds or whatever, but there's so many deeper things at play. Like these are women who had like crazy hormonal issues and thyroid issues and inflammation. And there's like so many things happening like deep below the surface where the weight is just a side effect of other things. And so that realization kind of sent me down the trajectory where I am now, where I dove into getting my diploma in wholesome nutrition and my FDN certification and all of that, because I wanted to be able to reach people at this deeper level and help them like really understand the root cause of what's going on in their body.
Very good. Nice. Yeah. And we're going to get into some of the energetic stuff that I'm super interested in a little bit later, but what are some of the first things you do then in that situation, right? And by the way, we're Pilates fans in this family as well. My wife does Pilates twice a week. I've been doing gyrotonics actually, just for mobility and stuff.
Awesome. Yes, it's so good. I love it.
Yeah, we love it. And so like you said, people are coming. They don't know why. They don't have the energy they used to. Maybe they're tired. They have trouble losing weight. What are some of the first steps that you would kind of do to, I guess, diagnose what's going on?
Yeah. So as an FDNP, as a functional practitioner, I do functional labs. So I kind of have a set of foundational labs that I run on my clients to just get as much data as possible. It's all about finding patterns and connecting dots. And so using those labs to kind of find the patterns and kind of see where the healing opportunities are, and then kind of making the protocol based on, what I see in the lab results and based on them too, and their symptomology and the symptoms that they've been dealing with. And a lot of the women I work with they're dealing with chronic symptoms. Like a lot of this has been a lot of them, it's been going on for decades, and they've done all the doctors, they've been to all the doctors, and it's either the medical gaslighting thing, which is a real thing, especially with women, where they just get brushed off, or it's the doctors tell them like, oh, well, you just learn to live with it, or you just have to be on meds the rest of your life. And, the women in my world, they don't accept that as an answer. Like they feel like there's something more, like there has to be another answer. And so for me, it's the labs. And you mentioned the energetic piece, and that's last year as I was evolving as a human, my business was evolving. I realized that yes, like the physical aspects, again, the functional labs, all that is important. But when you're looking at like the wellness wheel, right? There's all these different arms of the wellness wheel, right? And there's mental and emotional and spiritual. There's all these other parts of wellness. And you really and truly can't I say treat loosely. You can't address one without addressing all of them. And so that's where I got into the world of energetics and chakra balancing and this kind of spiritual, emotional, mental piece, and tying that into my programs, because that was the other piece I recognized with the women I was working with too, where like, yeah, they've got all these really, some of them serious issues or multiple issues that are going on. But then I'm recognizing like, okay, there's like some mental, emotional things here that need to be addressed. And I sense like there's some spiritual blockages that we need, so there's other things too that need to be addressed, kind of put the whole equation together. And so that's what I do. I, work with the functional labs. And then I also, I work with human design to help them be able to understand themselves on an energetic level. And then we work with, the energy centers, like the chakras, and we kind of put that spiritual piece together with it too.
Very, very interesting. I love, before we started recording, you actually asked me like, do you want to go the science or do you want to go woo-woo with this? Like,
how woo do you want to go?
Yeah. Well, I just love that we could go both those ways, right? And I think for me, those are my favorite types of people who can go science or woo-woo and kind of blend them together.
Yes.
So that's awesome. I did want to ask you, so like when you say functional labs, how does that compare to like traditional labs that like a regular doctor would do, let's say?
That's a great question. And I think it's a really important distinction. And I think a lot of people don't understand what that means. And most of the labs you're going to get at a doctor, at the, traditional, conventional doctor, whatever, are going to be blood labs, right? That's typically what they run. They run blood labs, and it's going to give you data. But when you're running blood labs, it's the information that you're getting. It's pretty like for an acute period of time, right? It's like what's going on right now in the body. And so yeah, it's going to give you data, but it's not really giving you what's going on chronically in the body. It's not really giving you data of like, how did I get to this point right here that you're measuring? And the other piece of that, when we're looking at comparing like functional levels and functional ranges versus conventional ranges, when you're looking, and you can go and look, like I'm not saying this because I'm biased, but I am, because I like the functional approach, but I'm saying this as a matter of fact, because you can look at the studies and how they come up with like the functional ranges with the functional lab, or the conventional range with conventional labs. With conventional labs, the ranges are based on like not even like optimally healthy people. It's based on like the average human, which is not an optimally healthy person. And so when you're looking at conventional labs, it's basically when the doctors are like, oh, your labs are fine. It's like, well, you're not dead. Like that's essentially what it means. When you're looking at functional labs, like we're looking at optimal health. Like, I don't want to just be not dead. I don't want to just, well, you don't have cancer. Like, that's it. Like, I want to live optimally. And so with the functional labs, it's getting into like at what's going on at a cellular level over a long period of time. And so we're using things like urine and hair and tissues and blood spots and stool tests. And there's all these other things. And the lab ranges are a lot more narrow, but for a reason, because we want to shoot for optimal health.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's important to do everything, right? Just blood. So you're like you mentioned the hair, right? So there's all sorts of different hair, urine, blood tests. And usually a lot of people are just only doing one. They'll go and they'll get their DNA test results or then they'll go do blood tests, right? And I'm guilty of that as well. So I think that's great to be kind of looking at everything there. So you mentioned here on your website, so you use functional labs to get to the root cause of physical symptoms and use the results along with the symptomology and in-depth lifestyle analysis to create a customized blueprint for a health journey. And then you also deep dive into human design and energetic makeup to pinpoint how your energy leaks. So let's talk about that. How is energy leaking for so many people? I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't want more energy, right?
Yeah, totally. Yes. So with human design is kind of like the energetic spiritual piece of the puzzle here. And I think I feel like there's a couple different ways you can look at human design, because you can get like real woo with the human design. Like you can go real deep into like the astrology parts and all of that. But then at like a basic level, it really is just looking at energetics, and it's your energetic blueprint. That's it. For those listening who don't know what human design is, it's the energetic blueprint of your soul, how you interact with the world around you, how you are here, how you were designed to be like here on planet Earth. And so when you're looking at human design, we're able to see how you best make decisions and how you best move, and there's so many things we can look at with your preferred environment. And there's so many parallels to your wellness with the human design, with the body graph. And that's why I like it, because I can see like how you best digest food, and how you process your emotions, and so there's so many things we can look at. The reason I like to look at human design, we as humans, we spend an excessive amount of energy trying to live by the shoulds, right? We live by the shoulds, what we should do here, what I should do there, how I should do this. And we kind of live against how we were designed. And when we live according to the shoulds and we're not living according to our design, we start to meet resistance, right? We start to feel stuck. We start to feel blocks. And when we do that for long enough, it starts to show up physically in the body, right? Our immune system starts to shut down. We start to feel burnout. We start to feel inflammation in the body because we're going against our design. We're living by the shoulds. When we're able to look past the shoulds and look at ourselves, how we're designed on an energetic level, we're able to really live with ease and flow because we're moving with our energy rather than against it. And so it allows us to, like we're talking about energy leaks, like to be able to really put our energy in the right place, point our energy in the right direction rather than going against how we're designed and meeting that resistance. And that's a lot of the women I work with. I work with mostly women. Sometimes I have men, sometimes I have kids, but majority it's women. In my nutrition practice, and they're driven women. Like they either have careers or they have businesses. Some of them have multiple businesses, and they're very driven. And there's so much conditioning by society and family and all this to do things a certain way, and it has to look like this, and I have to do it in this order, and I have to do it by this day. And if I don't do it, then I think there's so much pressure around that like it's almost always an energetic piece. Like I find that there's always this energetic spiritual root cause to the physical things that are showing up in their body. And so so it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right? Let's kind of see where that started. Like, where was this? We kind of have to decondition some things and help them really understand the human. And I love the human design piece because it not only helps me understand them, so I can really help use that as a part of our protocol, but it helps them understand them. Like, it helps you understand you. And I think that's the beauty. Like, when I first got into human design, this sounds so cheesy, but I felt like I was meeting myself for the first time, where it's like, I knew that piece of me, but it's like pieces that I'd either kind of like felt I needed to change or felt that I needed to hide or whatever. But it's like, no, like this is how it's designed. Like, this is me. And so I think it's a really beautiful thing. And we can add that into like the physical healing, because you're understanding how you're designed, understand how you're wired, and you can really use that to your benefit. And talking about peak performance, that's what you do. Like, it's like the ultimate performance hack. Like, I understand how I'm wired, and now I can live that way,
I love that. I completely agree. One of the things that healed me, in addition to obviously my nutrition and lowering inflammation in my body, there was a mental aspect. And actually, Dr. John Sarno has a bunch of books, right? And he really talks about like how people who are really driven have this kind of inner tension a lot of times, like this, like, I got to get this done, right?
Yes.
And like that tension causes like a lack of oxygen to certain parts of the body potentially.
Totally.
Yeah. And so like when I actually learned that, it's funny because what's crazy is just by reading his books, and I actually had a flare up a couple of years ago, and I just listened to his 3 audiobooks back to back, like in 3 days. And the pain was gone. It's just like crazy. And I don't
Amazing.
want to like, you know, again, I don't want to make claims or say to everything, but like, I think it's like something like half the people who like just listen to his books. Cause then it just gives you an understanding like, oh, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to, you know, stress myself out and make
Yep.
it worse by thinking that there's something wrong with me. I'm
Right.
just a driven person. This is inner tension.
Yeah.
I need to like calm down, chill out, right? You
Yeah.
obviously go much further with the
Hmm.
energetic
Hmm.
part of it. So yeah, I really love that. And but I wanted to kind of take a step back because you talked about a lot of interesting stuff. I think a lot of people might be wondering, including myself. So like, what is this? How do you do this kind of energetic a human by design
Hmm.
analysis, right? And you were
Hmm.
saying some people, you know, digest or eat a certain way. Some
Hmm.
people, you know, you mentioned a bunch of different kind of
Yeah.
things there.
Yeah.
How do you figure that out?
Yeah. So you can go online and get your free, it's called a body graph, a human design body graph, and you can get it for free. I always recommend just going to myhumandesign.com. I feel like she does it in the most easy to understand way, because you can get into the weeds real fast. Like I said, you can get real woo with it, and you can get real, like, you can get into it deep and it can get confusing. But I think she breaks it down in a really simple way where she gives you just like the most important pieces of the chart for you to understand. So you need your birthday, your birth time, and your birthplace. So the human design, basically what it does, it combines these kind of ancient teachings of like the chakra system and astrology and the I Ching, and then it puts it together with biomechanics and quantum physics and quantum mechanics and biochemistry, and it puts it together into this chart. And so basically I'm like analyzing your human design body graph, and I just give my clients like the most important pieces, again, so I'm not overwhelming them with too much information, but the parts that I was mentioning, like helping them understand like their type and what that means for their energy and their sleep and their when and how to eat.
Mm.
And you can, and on the charts you can see on if you use the myhumandesign.com, that one, it'll tell you your preferred environment, your digestion. It doesn't give you all the explanations, but it gives you enough where you're like, okay, this is cool, and you can kind of dive deeper into what somebody who knows what they're talking about. But these pieces sometimes are a game changer for my, like, sometimes it's like almost all they needed to know was like some of these pieces. And like you were talking about the pressure and the stress and stuff that people feel who are really driven, there's pieces of that I can untangle with the body graph, because it does tie in the chakra system. And the chakras, if those listening who don't know, they're energy systems in the body, and all of those energy systems they coordinate with certain glands and organs in the body. And so we can look at the energetic, like spiritual piece, and connect that to the physical piece just with those parts. Like, for example, on a client I did a call with last week, and she had been dealing with for years anxiety and adrenal, just fatigue, really adrenal fatigue, and it was just kind of on and off. And like looking at her chart, we're looking at like her root center, and she has an open root, which means she is more susceptible to like external pressure to get things done and do things a certain way. And so it's being able to understand that piece and then knowing how to manage that piece is like a total game changer, and being able to take care of your adrenals. And your root
Mhm.
center corresponds to your adrenal glands. Like those are the glands. So there's connections with the physical and the energetic body that we can put together looking at a human design body graph.
I love that. I love that. So, so they can go to that website. They would do that. You would kind of then review that and help them interpret
Right.
it and create a
Hmm.
plan around that.
Exactly.
What are some of the most common issues that you are seeing? I know you do a lot, and I know it's different, but what are kind of like the top situations that you encounter with people where they have, is it, you know, they heavy metals, or they're not sleeping enough, or it is some sort of blockage? Is there any kind of thing that is most common?
As far as like symptoms, like what they're coming to me for.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's never just one thing, right? And a lot of times people are
Mhm.
coming to me for one thing, but it's really the thing they're coming to me for isn't really the issue. Like hormones,
Mm.
for example. Like a lot of women come to me because they want me to help with their hormones. And they don't understand that their hormones are just another symptom of a deeper problem. The hormones are never the problem. The hormones are another symptom. The same thing with the energy. The energy thing is a huge thing. And again, I do work with a lot of really driven, high performing women. And so the energy piece, because like you mentioned before, like everybody wants more energy, and it sucks to have to go day to day without having the energy that you want and to get the things done that you want to get done, and without feeling like, you're dying. So the energy piece is huge. Energy and sleep are it's always on the list of symptoms. And again, I think a lot of times for women it's hormones, but it's not really what the problem is. And typically, we're looking at really intense gut issues as like a root cause. And I am a hair tissue mineral analysis expert certified. And so I do an HTMA, which is a hair tissue mineral analysis, like I'm looking analysis of their hair. And the mineral imbalances are always a thing. Heavy metals that you mentioned, I mean, that's something that I'd say 90% of the time shows up for people. So it's usually a combination of things that are causing the symptoms that they're coming to me for, that are causing, quote, quote, causing the hormonal issues. And it's a deeper issue, underlying root cause that I'm looking at. Interesting.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Wow. 90% usually have some sort of heavy metal thing. That's crazy. That sounds really high.
It is, and I really think we underestimate like toxicity in our world. I really do think we underestimate how much, because I think because we can't necessarily see the effects of toxicity, like physically. Sometimes we can, if they're bad enough, like sometimes we can, but it's usually like just kind of this like undercurrent that's just doing little things at a time, and under the surface in the body. And so I think because we can't physically see it, like I don't physically have this huge rash on my face because I have copper toxicity, that we don't think about addressing it. But we are exposed to so many toxins day in and day out. And I just think we underestimate the toxic load that we put on the body with, sometimes we can't avoid all of them, right? Like going outside, we breathe in a ton of toxins when you turn your car on, like, we breathe in stuff, but we're thinking about, our personal care products and cosmetics and what we clean our house with, and eating and drinking out of plastics, and, eating a lot of canned foods. Like there's so many things, so many ways that we come into contact with heavy metals and toxins. And I think we just underestimate the toxic load. And I've had clients come to me, thinking of one specifically. She came to me because she had been diagnosed with, it was either ADD or ADHD, I can't remember which one, and anxiety. That was like the two big things. And she was like, this just doesn't seem right. Like, I just feel like there's something else at play. And then we do all the labs and everything. And she'd been she was trying not to take medication, but she really couldn't focus. She's like, I don't want to take Adderall, but I don't know what else to do, because she had this really demanding job. Anyway, come to find out, she had parasites. So there's parasites wreaking havoc inside, and she had copper toxicity. Like it was like through the roof. Like she had these heavy metals, and that crosses the blood-brain barrier. No wonder you're feeling feelings of anxiety and ADD. Like your brain doesn't know how to function. So yeah, I think I feel like there's so many misdiagnoses going on that really have to do with our toxic load and our bodies just not being able to handle that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually surprised that more people don't talk about or do heavy metal testing, right?
Totally.
Like like you go to the hospital, for example, right? Like you go to the ER or something, and they're just going to do a blood test.
Right.
They're not doing a heavy metal toxicity, usually stuff like that, right? They're just doing a blood test, and then, oh, your blood came back fine. And then, so yeah, that's really interesting. So what advice do you like? Let's talk a little bit maybe about some things that you do in your life to avoid toxicity and heavy metals and things that like, so, and if someone has like, did you guys figure out where the high copper was coming from? Things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of times when we're looking at heavy metals, it's kind of like a chicken or egg situation, because the other thing she had show up on her test was super high calcium. When your calcium is super high, it builds what's called a calcium shell. And it's like this protective mechanism that our body has, where it's trying to protect your body from stress. And it can be from multiple things, but typically I think the majority of the time it's either like an acute trauma, like you had this super traumatic instance and your body's like, it's this protective mechanism to protect you from the trauma, or it's chronic stress. Like, and I think for her, it was the chronic stress. And it's protecting your cells. Like when you're under chronic stress, your body's shooting out cortisol, right? All day. It's pumping and pumping out the cortisol. And so we built up this calcium shell to basically protect your cells from all that cortisol coming out. So it starts to build this shell around your cells and the nerves, and it affects cellular permeability. So it affects things going in and out of your cells. And so for a lot of people, it's going to affect like your thyroid levels, because now your thyroid hormone can't get into your cells. It's going to affect your potassium levels and your sodium, like all the things that need to go in and out of your cells. So for her, typically copper, to directly answer your question, typically for women, it's coming from copper IUDs or it's coming from birth control. Those are the two main sources. For some people, it's kind of just a byproduct of the calcium shell and of the chronic stress, because now I have this calcium shell. And so it's basically, it creates an environment where it's easier for heavy metals to kind of build up in the body. So they're not excreting them like we should be. So, so yeah, so I think there's multiple, and to talk about other heavy metals, like the big ones that show up, copper for sure. Copper shows up, especially in women. I haven't run a whole lot of HTMAs on men, and the few I have, like copper isn't as much so far that I've seen. I can't say that blanket statement, but it's just not in my world. Mercury and aluminum are two that I see most often. Aluminum, like, always shows up, and it's not always super high where it's cause for concern, but sometimes it is. And that's such an easy one for us to avoid, really, in my opinion. Like, don't cook with aluminum foil, and, change your deodorant, your antiperspirants that have aluminum in them. There's easy ways for us to avoid aluminum. Mercury is one. There's a lot of sources of mercury. If you're eating a lot of high mercury fish, there's one. So I always recommend eating low mercury fish, and you can Google that. Like, you can find an easy list where you can look at the fish, but typically it's the deeper the fish, like the deeper the water the fish live in, the higher the mercury usually is how it works. So yeah,
I think it was there's some acronym like SMASH, I think, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon.
There is an acronym.
Herring,
yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, typically like the white fish, the smaller fish, like freshwater fish are going to be, lower mercury.
Tuna, right? And do you have concerns about that? And then let me ask you this. I don't want to ruin this for people. I already ruined it for myself because I don't eat sushi anymore after the first interview I did with someone who talked about heavy metals and parasites and stuff. But do you eat sushi? Are you okay with sushi? Do you avoid it?
I don't eat it all the time, but I do like sushi. I do.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's definitely cause for concern. But I feel like the other piece, I know what to do to like help myself detox and stuff. And so I feel like better, like, it's like, at least I have the tools to know, like, okay, if I'm going to eat the sushi, like, let's be prepared. And like, I feel like I have the tools to kind of help, but yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. And, there's a girl that I follow on Instagram. She's like the worm expert, and the video she puts on Instagram, it's like, it'll make you never want to eat sushi ever again the rest of your life. So I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah. But but tuna is high in mercury, and there are some lower mercury tunas that you can find, but, just limiting, not saying you can't ever eat it the rest of your life, but just, limiting your exposure to it. But the other thing for mercury, vaccines, and this isn't me saying you should or shouldn't get vaccinated, but vaccines do have mercury in them. And just knowing that there are really good supplements that you can take to detox from vaccines. If you do get vaccinated, it's an easy way to support your body. Same thing, like I'm talking with sushi, like you can help detox your body from these things. Same thing with vaccines. When you do get vaccinated, just helping your body detox from the heavy metals that are in the vaccines. Like it's an easy thing to do.
Is there any off the top of your head that you could mention that you would recommend people do, like supplements or something? Yeah.
So if you find a good binder is always a good way to help detox. So like zeolite is always good. Anything with like fulvic or humic acid, those are really good binders, and those help bind to things and help your body excrete them in the bile.
Like activated charcoal or something like that?
Activated charcoal is a good one too. Yeah. That one I find helps more with like gut stuff, but it is a good binder. Yeah. And then, supporting yourself with like zinc. Zinc is a good way to help, like zinc and lithium. Those are good to help support while you're getting rid of heavy metals. And then the biggest source I find in mercury, though, are amalgam fillings. And I've had clients, my clients, and I've had other fellow FDNs or clients who have gone to like a biological dentist to get rid of their amalgam fillings. And it's like a switch turns off, and all of a sudden the symptoms they were having are gone. Like, I mean, it's crazy. So the amalgam fillings are a huge, if you think about it though, there's mercury in your teeth, like 24/7. Like, of course it's going to affect things,
Yeah. I got rid of mine a few years back too, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah. I went to a specialist who had, the special protocol and the whole thing. Cause I was like, I had these things from when I was a kid. I don't know, and then, then, at one point I was grinding my teeth at night. I don't think I do
Mm.
anymore, luckily. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm off gassing, mercury into my mouth every
Right?
night. No. So yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, I got rid of that. Luckily, well, I don't
Awesome.
know. Maybe it was part of my symptoms years ago. I really
You
don't know,
never
but
know. Yeah, you
always
never
good to
know.
get rid of it.
Totally.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Yeah.
And the aluminum
Yeah.
one, you said, oh man, I cringe every time people cook with aluminum
I
foil or wrap things in
know.
aluminum foil,
Yes. I
and then you're cooking
know.
with heat on the aluminum foil.
Yes. That's the worst. That's the worst. Like wrapping
Oof.
something in it is one thing, but cooking it with the heat. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah. And the deodorant, yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully people listening to this podcast know by now, like, aluminum free deodorant,
Yeah.
not an antiperspirant.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an easy fix because even like the name brand stuff now have aluminum free versions. I feel like that's an easy fix for people now. Like, people know. And so I think it's an easy fix.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is super interesting stuff. This is really good stuff. So yeah, and so you mentioned hormones, and it's interesting. I'm noticing this too. It's like the people I know who eat the healthiest and live the healthiest lifestyle and aren't under like immense stress or whatever, right? Like those people just, by some miraculous miracle, they have the best hormone, right? But it's like, so it's always like, oh, hormone, I need to jump, and hormone therapy has its place. We interviewed someone a few weeks ago on hormone therapy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it can have its place,
Totally.
especially as you age, as you get
Mhm.
older. But I think a lot of people miss that, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I know someone, I'm not gonna, there's a kind of pretty famous guy, and he's like, always talking about, always bragging and showing how he's like eating dessert every night and this and that. And then it's like, he's 30 years old and he's on TRT because his testosterone's low. But like no one's ever put two and two together that like eating sugar every single day might
Right.
lower your testosterone. And that's why
Yes.
you have to supplement at age 30, when hopefully you don't need to supplement until, age 40s or
Yes.
50s at least,
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. 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 I mean, there's a huge connection between, like, specifically talking about blood sugar, and that's one of the biggest things I work with my clients on that have hormonal issues is the blood sugar. Like there's such a huge connection between your blood sugar and your hormones, and then your stress and your hormones. Like I mean, your stress, I mean, all of that, like all of those three things are so tied together because our stress hormones, the hormones, right, they're going to affect your sex hormones. Our blood sugar regulation requires hormones. Insulin is a hormone, like it requires hormones to regulate. So there's every process in the body requires hormones. I mean, they're just those chemical messengers. Like they've got to tell things what to do and when to do it and how to do it. So our blood sugar and our stress, like our adrenal health, I feel like that's a big piece of it. I feel like our adrenal health is really underestimated, and it's what's causing it. And at least what I see, it's what's causing so many issues. I mean, it's causing the blood sugar dysregulation. It's what's causing the crazy hormonal imbalances. That I think the adrenals are just really underestimated, undervalued as part of the body.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. Cause I think even myself, I've heard adrenal a lot, and I've heard of different supplements that are good for
Yeah.
adrenal support, natural herbs, but like,
Mhm.
I don't really I'm not sure that many of us listening fully understand, like, what does that mean?
Right.
Adrenal exactly?
Right. What do they
Why is
do?
it fatigued?
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, it's important. And like I mentioned before, I mean, driven people, a lot of times they're driven to drive their adrenals into adrenal fatigue. So it's common. So your adrenals are these little glands that sit around your kidneys, and they're responsible for basically helping our bodies adapt to stress, right? They're emitting stress hormones. So, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, like all of these hormones, that's what they're responsible for. And cortisol, while a lot of times it's, we think about it negatively, like our bodies, we need cortisol. Cortisol is what helps us through a stressful situation.
Mhm.
But per our, like, really Western society, like we're chronically stressed. And so our adrenals are constantly pushing out cortisol. And when it's constantly pushing out cortisol, they're going to wear out, right? It's the same thing when people get diabetes, right? You're constantly pumping out insulin. Well, and your pancreas is going to get tired, and then it's not going to know what to do with it. It's the same thing with your adrenals. So when we're constantly pushing out cortisol, so the way our adrenals work, it's kind of, if you can kind of picture like a curve, like a bell curve. So our cortisol levels are just high, 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 high. Our adrenals are constantly pushing out. So you kind of get to the top of the bell curve, and you're like, running off of cortisol, right? Which it's kind of that like wired but tired feeling, like I'm tired, but I can't slow down and I can't stop. I can't like that's so then once you hit that and you start to teeter on that other side of the bell curve, at the other side of the bell curve is where you hit complete adrenal exhaustion and complete adrenal burnout, because eventually your adrenals aren't going to be able to pump out that same amount of cortisol. And it's going to start pumping out less and less and less and less cortisol. I experienced this myself. I didn't realize this until I went through the FDN program, and had to run labs on myself going through the program. My cortisol levels were like in the toilet. Like, I'm like, how am I even functioning? And then, thinking back, there's all these things that I kept pushing back, like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm getting sick all the time, but I'm fine. Like there's so many things I pushed out of my head, but that's what happens though, is eventually your adrenals can't make the same amount of cortisol. And then you hit that adrenal burnout, you hit the adrenal fatigue and that just exhausted phase. And that's
what are some of the things that are causing, what are some of the things like that are causing, I mean, obviously like not sleeping good. So like, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But then is like, obviously, I mean, I would assume like energy drinks or things that are just like,
oh yeah,
pumping,
totally. Oh my gosh. I could talk about caffeine all day. And my husband and I have this conversation a lot because he drinks coffee and he likes to get like the energy drink when he goes to the gym. And I'm like, your adrenals. Yeah. The caffeine it's a stimulant. It's stimulating the body and it's stimulating your adrenals. It does cause a cortisol reaction in the body. And so, my gosh, yes, our like over caffeinated society, we're just wearing down our adrenals left and right with things like caffeine. And oh my gosh, yeah, that's a huge.
Some of the other ones in the energy drinks are even worse. But yeah, I agree with you. I do try to. I mean, listen, I love my coffee in the morning, but I do try to stick to my one cup a day.
Yes, there's nothing wrong with coffee,
I hear people drinking like 5 cups a day or something. And you're like, wow, and you have to. I think at that point you have to really think about like, why do I need 5 cups of coffee to function every day? Right.
That's exactly it. And that's really what my clients and I do have some like coffee addicts that I work with. And I'm like, and that's what I tell them too. Like, there's a reason that your body thinks it needs the caffeine. Like, we need to figure out why your body can't function without the caffeine. Like, there's a
and some of those other stimulants, the energy drink stimulants are even worse.
Yes.
I would imagine something like an Adderall, and stimulants like that, right? Could, would be really tough.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It all affects the adrenals. Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay. So that's, so then, so you sorry, I cut you off, I think there too. So you were finishing up on adrenals, and then, so that's kind of like some of the issues, some of the things we can do there. And then, I guess, how are you addressing then? Obviously, I guess we just spoke about some of the things you're looking at to address it, but then there's, so kind of transitioning as well from finishing up on addressing adrenals, and then also kind of like other energetic, kind of imbalances that you're seeing.
Yeah. So with the adrenals, the big thing, of course, is stress, right? Like addressing the source of the stress. That's the big thing. Caffeine, addressing that. And like for my clients, at least through our work together, like we get off all caffeine, and I'm not telling them they have to get off caffeine for forever, but like, while we're trying to let the body heal, we got to give your adrenals a break. Like it's just constantly wearing out your adrenals. And so mindful use of caffeine afterwards is what I recommend. Like, and you could have your cup of coffee in the morning, but not drinking it on an empty stomach. First of all, that's another thing that is going to cause extra stimulation. Like, let's drink it with food or whatever. And then the other piece of that is supporting your adrenals with the right minerals. So, your adrenals use more sodium than any other part of the body. And this is another thing I could talk about for hours, is sodium, because this is one of those, I feel like sodium has been kind of like carbs. Like, we've demonized sodium over the past, multiple decades, and, it causes high blood pressure and strokes and all these things. And if you go down the rabbit hole of the research about sodium, when it started, it was like the 40s or 50s or something. It just started with this one doctor who made the correlation in his own head about some patients that he had who had high blood pressure. It wasn't based on sound scientific research that said, oh, sodium causes high blood pressure. If you look at different cultures around the world who eat diets higher in sodium, they don't have high blood pressure. You know what causes high blood pressure? The standard American diet. Because it's not the sodium, it's where you're getting the salt from. right? When you're
Yeah.
getting it from processed foods and from table salt. Like table salt is the equivalent of white sugar. It's been through all these chemicals that have stripped away every nutritional value in it. And it's just the sodium chloride that's left, right? If you compare that to like unrefined sea salt, Celtic salt, sea salt is always my number one recommendation. Or like a pink Himalayan salt. There's anywhere from like 80, I think it's like 84 to 95 other trace minerals in those unrefined versions of the salt. So when you're eating those versions of the salt, you're getting all these other trace minerals that are allowing the sodium to go where it needs to go to help with the fluid retention. Because that's the thing, we don't have a sodium intake problem. It's a sodium retention problem. That's what causes high blood pressure. So when you're able to get it from an unrefined source with all these other trace minerals, it tells the sodium where to go and what to do. So going back to the original point about adrenals, I went down a rabbit hole there. I could talk about that all day.
No, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. It's helpful. And the thing is with your adrenals, and this is kind of one of those like mind things that my clients have to get through, because I'm telling them to put salt in their water. Like, I need you to support your adrenals by putting salt in your water. Like, what? Like, you know, the doctor's been telling me to cut my salt intake all these years and blah, blah. And I'm like, that's not the issue. I'm telling you.
But it's a good distinction, though, that you mentioned was Celtic salt versus table salt, right?
Exactly,
and where they're getting it from, right? It's like, oh, this person has high sodium or has some issues from sodium. It's like, okay, yeah, because they're eating processed bread or, you know, pasta or whatever, right? And they're getting too much sodium. But like people who are eating healthier diets, especially, and not eating just like processed bread and stuff like that all the time, they actually need the salt. I actually take Celtic salt. It's my favorite. I put it on my eggs every day. I put it on my, you know, my food at night, my salmon and broccoli. It's great. And it actually makes the food taste way better. So it's a real treat.
Yes. And I put on my kids' food. We like make avocado toast and we sprinkle the salt. Like it really is. And it really is supportive for your adrenals. So your adrenals need sodium. And when I run an HTMA hair tissue analysis, I have never, and I can say this as a matter of fact, I have never had a client with excess sodium ever. I've had a couple clients where the sodium is where it needs to be. Almost, I'd say, again, I would probably go 90% of my clients, maybe more than that, of my clients have a deficiency in sodium.
Wow.
So it's the adrenals. It's the adrenals. So I would say that's probably my number. Sodium and magnesium are probably the best two ways to support your adrenals. So if you want to go run with that, there's your tips for the adrenals.
I love that. I never miss magnesium. Every night I take my magnesium and I put the Celtic salt. But I think it's a good distinction though, right? We don't want people running around getting putting pounds of table salt on stuff. Yeah. So that's a good distinction.
Yes.
Celtic salt, pink Himalayan salt, I guess, is kind of behind that. There's a couple other good ones. I think there's some like Redmond's salt.
I do like the Redmonds. I do recommend that to my clients too. The Redmonds, they source theirs from the Great Salt Lake. So it's a good quality from, the Great Salt Lake. And they have a really good, I always recommend their electrolyte mixes for my clients because they use the good quality salts. They just use stevia. Like it's all really good ingredients. It's really good. They have really good products. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I know we got to wrap up soon. I did want to kind of end with one more kind of question for you around like going back to the energetic stuff, right? This is really fascinating for me. So, and the chakras. Like even personally myself, I've heard of chakras lots of time. I've seen the picture with where the chakras are. Now what? Like, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is like this is another one of those rabbit holes I could go down for hours. So if you look at, your body actually has a whole bunch of chakras. We typically look at like the 7 main chakras. And they start at the base of like your pelvis and then they run up through the top of your head. And all of these, they're energy systems. Like Sanskrit, chakra is a Sanskrit word for wheel. So it's a wheel of energy that runs different wheels that run through the body. And so, like I mentioned before, all of these energy centers correspond to different organs and glands in the body. And if you look at traditional Chinese medicine teaches that the endocrine system is like the gate to the balance of yin and yang in the body. And that's essentially what the chakras connect to. The chakras correspond to the endocrine system it's your glands in the body, right? So it all relates. So I'm a huge proponent of that it is the gateway to the balance of yin and yang in the body, and the balance in the body is balance in the chakras, balance in the endocrine system. And so, when we're looking at like I guess I don't know. I'm trying to like not go down a huge rabbit hole and take another hour to talk about the chakras, but we're looking at like the main ones that typically need, attention, I guess. The root chakra I mentioned before, the root chakra is a big one because it's tied to our adrenals, and we're just really good at running out of our adrenals. So the root chakra is always a good one to like connect with and kind of maybe learn more about. The root chakra, the solar plexus chakra is a good one. This is our emotional center, and I find this is a really important one. And I usually go into depth on this one with my clients in their human design chart, because and this is by design. This is not by accident. This is by design. Our solar plexus chakra, our emotional center, corresponds with our detox organs. And so if you think about it, like you think about emotion, this is your emotional center. It's coordinated with our detox organs. Emotions are energy in motion. They are meant to be in motion. They're meant to stay in motion. When they are no longer in motion is when it becomes a problem. They are stored in the body as toxins on a cellular level. So I love talking about this center, because when you are not processing your emotions, when you're not feeling your emotions, when you're not moving through your emotions, your body literally cannot get rid of toxins. You're affecting your detox organs, your liver, your kidneys, like all those organs that are helping get rid of toxins in the body. So I love to hone in on that solar plexus chakra, because there's always work to be done there. And there's always a reason that your body's holding on to toxins. And I always go to that chakra.
Interesting. And so I know you're certified in Reiki, which I've heard a lot about, as to do with energy healing and chakras and stuff like that. So is that something then? So it's really interesting how much, I'm learning more and more that mental health and how, it affects your physical health, and, with these things as well. Right. And so it sounds to me like not only are you doing, in some cases, Reiki and trying to, use your hands and energy in some way to remove energy blockages in certain chakras, from what I've understand of it. But also you're doing like you're essentially kind of coaching them in a way, right? Mentally, to help remove blockages.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. Well, it always helps to have someone, it helps to have that outside perspective, right? And for somebody to see things from the outside. And that's the thing too. It's like, it's kind of what I said at the beginning, when I'm looking at the functional labs and finding patterns and connecting dots. You can do the same thing with the energy work. Like I'm seeing like where the big issues are in the body. Is it the adrenals? Is it the liver? Is it the kidneys? And then it can correlate that with, okay, well, what energy centers are we looking for? Okay, well, let's look into that. Is it, okay, so say it's your liver and your kidneys. Okay, well, let's talk about emotionally, like what are we holding on to? Like, let's look back at, traumas we've been dealing. And that comes up a lot for my clients. I have a handful of clients who have, they're healing from trauma from narcissistic relationships, or just traumatic things they've been through, childhood traumas. Like there's different things that we kind of have to work through. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely a coaching process for that, like mental, emotional piece to help process things.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of coaching in all forms. I like to have multiple coaches at any given time.
Agreed.
Trainers, coaches, you name it. I'm a huge fan. I think they're really undervalued. Most people don't invest enough in coaching and in themselves, and having someone, and when it comes to health, even more so, right? It's like health is the most important aspect of your life. Without your health, you have nothing. And people will invest in everything else, but their health. It's unbelievable, which actually is a great segue into how can people learn more from you? And and I believe you do coaching, I think maybe one-on-one as well as in group settings. Is that right?
Yep, I do. Yeah. So you can check out my website. It's hopefulandwholesome.com. I've got I have one-on-one programs. I have kind of some more self-guided group programs. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza. And then I have a free Facebook group, which I always like to recommend to people as just kind of a first step, just to kind of learn and just kind of help you on your journey. It's live wholesome, live wholesome and healthy. Sorry, is my Facebook group. And I live. Yeah, that's the name of it. I was like, I'm second guessing myself. That's the name of it. But yeah, it's just all functional and holistic nutrition, and it's just a great place to kind of, strategies and tips and help you on your journey.
That's amazing. And just to make sure everyone got to your website correctly, it's hopeful, like spelled out the word hopeful and wholesome.com, spelled out hopeful and wholesome.com. Love that.
That's right.
We'll put that in the show notes as well there. Well, Hope, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was a lot of fun. We went in a lot of different
Yeah, we
directions and
did.
covered
I
a lot of
loved
stuff.
it.
Yeah, yeah, it was really, really a pleasure. Thank you so much, and hope to have you on again in the
Thank
future.
you. Yes, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.